Everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Floor Sits. Today I'm going to be talking about a subject that is very near and dear to my heart and was something that was very highly requested in my last Floor Sits video. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about being the loved one of an addict, an alcoholic, someone with a drinking problem. This is something I have about 10 years worth of experience as far as going through this process, so I thought that I would share, my experience with you guys and hope that it can help some of you who may feel like you're alone or, might be going through it right now and just want some extra encouragement. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have a little notebook here of notes I made, and this video is very, very, very important to me in a sense of that I really want to do this right. I don't think I'm going to this time. I honestly just didn't really know where to start. So I thought that starting out, I would just kind of tell you guys my experience, and then later on maybe do a part 2 if you guys have lots of questions, or if there's something specific that you want me to hit on, then I can do that in another video. I have a video planned for September for National Recovery Month to actually do with my brother, who is someone who I'm going to talk about in this video. So maybe he can answer some of your questions and we can talk really openly about what it's like to live with addiction and to live with someone who is suffering from addiction. And yeah, so I'm just gonna get started. The first thing I want to do is a little disclaimer and say first of all that all of the information I'm going to talk about in this video is my personal experience. I'm not a professional. I do not claim to be a professional. This is just something that I have dealt with for almost 10 years. In September it'll be 10 years. So I'm just speaking from my own experience, from things I've learned through family counseling, things I've learned in my own counseling sessions, and ones that I was the patient in because I'm not a professional. But I'm gonna be talking about those things. I am gonna be talking about addiction in terms of my personal belief that it is a disease, that it's a mental illness that has a genetic and a chemical component to it. If you don't agree with that, this isn't going to be the video for you. So just click on away. There's plenty of other stuff you can watch on my channel or somewhere else. And the third thing I want to give a disclaimer on is that all of the information I will be talking about in terms of my family members, I have been given permission to talk about. This is not something that I am just doing to out my family and the things that have happened in my family. I have talked to my brother, who is I'm going to talk about the most throughout this video. I've talked to him. He is perfectly fine with this video going up. He is very proud of his recovery. He is an advocate for wanting other people to get help and helping other families deal with the other effects of alcoholism, addiction. So be it. So now that my really long intro is over, those are my disclaimers. I have permission to talk about these things. I'm going to talk about them honestly, and I'm going to talk about them in terms of addiction being a mental illness. Okay, just to give you guys a little bit of context of what my story is, I have my brother who is 2 years older than me. His name is Zach, and he is in recovery now from drug and alcohol addiction. He went to treatment for around, I think it was 11 months, back when I believe I was 19, so about 3 years ago, almost 4. He went into treatment for drug and alcohol addiction. He has now been sober, I believe, 3 years. And then the other side of my story is that my dad, when I was 13, went into alcohol treatment center for about 9 months and was there for quite a while, and he is now sober. We had a very close relationship to begin with throughout his addiction, and then also afterwards. We were very, very close for many years, and then in the past 4 or so years, some other things have come up, and I no longer have a speaking relationship with my father at this point in my life. That is something I am not really going to touch on in this video very much because I am still very much in the healing process from that. I have not figured out what works for me in terms of healing and getting over it, and it's still something that is a very sensitive subject with me. It's still something that my heart very much needs healing from. So I'm not in a place where I'm comfortable enough to speak about that right now. So if that happens someday that I do feel comfortable about speaking about that subject, I will let you guys know. I don't see that happening right now, but what I can speak to is my relationship with my brother. Okay, like I said, I don't really know what I'm gonna end up doing with this video, other than I wanted to give you guys some context and kind of tell my story. My story as far as my relationship with my brother goes, my brother, you know, suffered very, I don't want to say outwardly, because there are parts of it that were definitely hidden, but he struggled pretty badly with alcohol and drug addiction from a pretty young age. It was something we didn't really discover was a problem until he was probably, I'd say 18, 19 years old, when he really started to act out, when we really started to notice that he had a problem. And then when he went away to college, he had a whole lot of trouble in college as far as partying, drinking, staying up all the time, never being sober, experimenting with more drugs, experimenting with lots of other things. And eventually he came home from school and spent some time back in Memphis, Tennessee, which is where we live, and he ended up spending some time there for a while, and then that was when he eventually hit his rock bottom, which, if you aren't familiar with recovery terms, rock bottom essentially means like that place that an addict will sometimes get to. Sometimes that rock bottom is dying. Sometimes that rock bottom is just hitting a place where you just hit solid ground. There's no farther fall, like down you could fall. It's the worst of the worst, the worst time. Nothing we can do like to move down from that period. So my brother hit rock bottom when he, I believe, was 20. He celebrated his 21st birthday in treatment. He hit rock bottom and he ended up going into what is called the legitimate alcohol recovery addiction center for, I want to say 3 or 4 months. I'm sure you can correct me on that later. And then moved into what is called an aftercare program, which is essentially like a program that helps people re-assimilate into life as an addict, because my brother was so young. He was only 21. He was right in the midst of that age where your friends are going out, they're, you know, getting engaged and having weddings, and then, you know, there's alcohol there, or they're going out and they're partying, and that's what they do to be social. And so it was about teaching healthy coping mechanisms so that he could go back out into the real world as a young recovering addict and find his place and not find loads of temptation. So he is now, like I said, I believe 3 years sober, maybe almost 4. I believe that will be in June, will be his recovery birthday. And yeah, so that's kind of my backstory on things. I wanted to talk about, you know, in terms of how that affected me and things of that nature. Now, I think the thing I suffered with the most, though, was that initial having to go through the process when I was 13 and my dad was going into treatment. My dad was more of a reclusive addict, in the sense that he didn't really make his addiction known outside of his home. Nobody really knew the extent to which he had a problem. He was drinking all the time, but he lived alone with his dog, so, you know, we weren't ever there really. And then he was kind of just drunk all the time and no one ever knew, and he hit his rock bottom, and that was when he entered into treatment. And for about the first 3 months of treatment or so, for the place that my dad was at, we were not allowed to have any sort of contact with him while he did his intake and, you know, went through withdrawal. He went into the system, got acquainted with everything that was happening, and really started on his path to recovery. So I didn't see him for about 3 months, and that was very, 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 very hard on me. I was in complete denial. I had, you know, I was like, nope, my dad isn't an alcoholic because he's getting sober now, which you learn throughout the process of recovery that that's not the case, that the person will always be an addict. They will always have addict tendencies. They will always have an addict mind. And when I was very, very, very depressed, I missed a lot of school. I didn't know I was depressed, and I didn't know that I had anxiety at that point. I used to, like, you know, my mom would sleep with me almost every night because I was scared. I didn't realize that scared was anxious, and I would be like terrified, like there was a ghost coming to get me, or somebody was gonna come get me, or something really bad was gonna happen. And it was like every single night for many, many, many months. It got a little bit better when I could finally see my dad again. Like I said, we were very, very close. It got better once we started to see him, and then I was able to go to visitation for the rest of the time that he was there, every Sunday, and I was there every single Sunday, and got to spend time with him. And eventually he got out, and he has stayed sober since, at least to my knowledge. But I guess I wanted to talk about that in a sense of I know that when I was 13, I knew no one else going through the same situation. I knew nobody that had somebody with a drinking problem. I had a lot of friends who didn't understand it and didn't want to be friends with me anymore because they were afraid of it, or because they were ashamed, or, you know, they didn't want to try to understand. I didn't know of anybody else who had a parent that was going through that, because nobody ever really talks about it. So when I was thinking about this video, I was thinking about, like, what would I want my 13-year-old self to know? And for me, that is, first of all, I wish that I had recognized that what I was experiencing was depression. I wish I could have gotten help a lot earlier for that. That's something that stuck with me for many years after, until I really learned more about mental health, and then realized, oh wow, I really was depressed. I wish I had trusted therapy more. I wish I had gone more than just that one time. And, you know, I went because my mom wanted me to go, and I hated it. And I was like, I'm never going back because I have to talk about my feelings. And I never went back. And so I really wish as a 13-year-old that I, you know, had stayed in therapy. I feel like I would be in a very different place, a different time, had I done that. I wish I would have known what anxiety was. I wish I could have recognized that. I wish that I could have seen that, like, I wasn't a big scaredy cat. I was just anxious because I was going through a very new and strange and lonely place. Not having my dad around, and, you know, it has a huge impact on your family, and your family dynamic changes a lot. And my parents were divorced at this period. My mom was remarried, my dad was not, but, you know, it took a toll on everybody in the family. It wasn't just my dad who had gone away. It wasn't just me who was depressed. You know, it affected my brother, it affected my mom, it affected my stepdad. You know, it affected his dog, who was one of my pride and joy of life, you know, couldn't stay with us because we didn't have room to take care of her. So she had to go stay with one of our family members, and everyone got so affected by this. And, you know, it was a very, very lonely time because I was always the kid that stepped out of the way. Like, I was the one that wanted to be in the background so that everybody else could focus on their problems, because their problems were bigger than mine. You know, my dad had done a lot of things to hurt a lot of people. I felt bad that we were so close, so I stepped back and let everybody's problems come before mine. And, you know, everybody else had their stuff to deal with, so I made the decision to step out of the way and let, you know, other people's problems be the centerpiece. And I really wish I hadn't done that. I wish, looking back, you know, that I had been more upfront about how I was feeling. There would be a lot less resentment in my life. There would be a lot less, you know, insecurity, in a sense of, like, I don't want to put myself out in front of people because I don't want them to think that I think my problems are better than their problems, or, you know, anything of that nature. So I see all the things it did to me, and a lot of it was my own choice. Of course, I was going through things as a 13-year-old that you don't always understand how you're feeling at 13, because there's lots of things happening in your life at 13. You want to have friends, you want to have your family, you know. And I was going through a period of time where my friends kind of pieced out on me and were like, we don't want to deal with the fact that you're depressed. And so they kind of pieced out. They didn't want anything to do with me. I was very lonely at home. I was very lonely at school. I rarely ever went to school because I was so depressed. And it was a really, really, really hard time for me. And, you know, I just think about myself at 13 and how much I wish that there would have been somebody who was brave enough to step up and say, hey, I'm going through the same things. Or, you know, somebody who was older who could look at me and say, like, you're gonna be okay, like, you're gonna be fine. And I didn't have that at 13. So I hope that if you're young, or even if you're not, and you're going through a similar situation, whether or not that person is getting treatment or not, I want you to know that you're not alone. And that sounds so cheesy, but I want you to know that there's somebody out there who went through the same thing. And guys, I am doing so well now. I had to go through the whole situation twice, and I made it out alive. Like, I'm doing okay. I live in Los Angeles now. I have a great job. I have good friends. I have a wonderful, precious little dog who's sleeping behind me. I'm doing really well. My family is stronger than ever, and it's gonna be okay. And I know it doesn't seem like it. I know when I was going through it that I didn't know how not to be hurting. I think that became my identity, became the girl who was hurt but always suffered in silence. And I want you to know that's not who you have to be. And I really, really, really encourage you to speak up and to talk to someone and to say, I'm not doing okay and I need some help. And whether that's somebody professional, it's a friend, it's a school guidance counselor, it's your parents, it's your brother, it's your sister, it's just someone who can hear you out and say, if it's me, please come to me and say, I'm having a really hard time and I want to encourage you and I want to tell you that it's going to be okay and I want to try to help you in any way that I can. And I just want you to know that it's okay to feel, it's okay to have doubts, it's okay to sometimes feel relief when something happens and they have to go away because you've been so wrapped up in the midst of all of it. It's okay to feel relief that they're finally somewhere where they're safe and you don't have to deal with it anymore and you can have a little break from it. Like, it's okay to feel that way too. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel, you know, sad. And you know, I dealt with so much guilt for so many years of how did I not recognize it? How did I not know it was this bad? We were so close. You know, how did I not know that this was happening? How can I be angry? How can I be sad? How can I be happy and relieved that that there's a, you know, a period of time where we can kind of relax? And you know, it's okay to feel all of those emotions, but I just pray that you don't let that manifest into guilt the way that I did. And it's not your responsibility. It's not your fault. Those people made choices that you couldn't stop them from making. And just know that that's not your fault. It's not your problem, and they can't heal for anyone but themselves. And no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you say, how much you do, that person has to make that decision. And if something happens, good or bad, it's not your fault and it's not your responsibility. And I want you to not carry that burden with you the way that I did, and know that it's going to be okay and that person is still going to love you. And you know, it's okay to feel angry and sad and mad and all of those emotions. So now that I've kind of talked a little bit about my dad, I want to talk about going through that experience for a second time, what that was like for me. It was a very, very different situation than what I went through with my dad. My dad obviously was older, my brother was younger. My dad was more of a hermit type. My brother was more of the social butterfly type. He was very open, he was very angry. He had lots of stuff that he was going through that nobody knew. And he was very angry, very resentful, very made, you know, life very stressful for a lot of people. And I know that he wouldn't mind me saying that because he knows that. And that was a situation in which there was a very active addict in my family, and that so I've seen both sides of having no clue, no idea that something bad was going on, and also being in the midst of it and seeing it destroy, you know, his spirit and his soul, and you know, the family dynamic and the things that happened there. Like, I saw his spirit break, and I saw the things that he was, you know, in pain for. I saw the help he was crying out for, and I saw the help that he didn't want. And I'm very glad he decided that he did. But you know, he was a very, very angry addict. He experimented with both drugs and alcohol, whereas to my knowledge, my dad was only alcohol. My brother was very depressed, but he was also very kind of manic at times. I don't believe he's bipolar, but he, you know, had times where he was so messed up from the drugs and the alcohol that he was, in a sense, manic, and he would go days without sleeping, and he would be, you know, he'd get really, really sick. He'd try to, you know, get himself sober, and he would withdraw and get really sick and then say he had the flu. And you know, he was very angry. The relationship with he and my mom were very strained. You know, the relationship between the two of us, while we were close, was very arm's length because we had very different values. The way that he handled things that happened in our life versus the way I handled things were opposite ends of the spectrum. And so it was a very difficult time. It was a very hard battle to finally, you know, get him some help, and he decided to make that choice on his own. That was not something that was forced upon him. That was not something that was an intervention and said, you know, we all sat him down and were like, what you're doing is self-destructive and you need to stop. It was a decision he came to on his own one night, when he says that basically the voice of God came down and told him, after he had taken a lot of drugs and had a lot of alcohol, that he was either going to die or he was going to get help. And he decided that he didn't want to die and that he wanted to get help. And so he called my parents and they picked him up, and literally hours later they drove him to North Carolina to go to treatment, where he went through withdrawal in the hospital and went through detox there, and then spent the next couple of months basically living in the woods, and got sober and is doing so incredibly well and is succeeding in everything that he's doing in life. We're still very close. He's coming out here in May. I'm going back for his graduation in August, and so he got his life together and things are so great. And yeah, there's so much more to that story that I think that he and I sitting down and kind of doing a Q&A would answer a lot of questions about things. But some of the things I learned from that were that a lot of times you think you know people really well, and then you can find out things about them that you no longer want to associate with. And that was sort of what happened with the relationship with my dad, and just knowing that you don't owe anybody anything. You can't save anybody, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, how much money you give someone, how much attention you give them, how much, you love them. If they don't love themselves and if they aren't gonna save themselves, there's nothing you can do about that. And for so many years I pushed so hard for my brother to get help for whatever it was he was going through. I don't know that I always knew it was addiction. I just knew he was really angry, and I just I pushed for so many years for him to get help and for him to stop doing these destructive things. And I'd tell him that I wish he wouldn't drink, and I'd tell him that I wish he wouldn't do these things, and I didn't want to be a part of them. And no matter how much I pushed and I prayed for him, he had to make that decision. And it just taught me that you can't save anybody, and that people can get better, they can change, they can come out on the other side and be who you wanted them to be all along. But that's not by anything that you've done. That's what they've chosen to do, and you can't take credit for that, and you can't put that upon yourself to try to change people who aren't willing to change and who aren't willing to make themselves better. You have to be willing to let go of that and say, that's not my responsibility and that's not my fault. So now that I've rambled on for a very, very long video, I hope you guys have learned something from this or have made you feel better in any way, shape, or form. I wish that I could make this 2 hours long and talk to you about everything, but I feel like a little bit of guidance would be helpful. So I would love to hear what kind of things you guys would want me to talk about in relation to this. I want to try to give you guys any advice that I can, whether that's in another video, if you guys want another video, or if you want me to just answer questions down in the comments. I'm also going to leave a link to an anonymous ask box. So if you don't feel comfortable putting things out on the internet like that, you can go there. It'll be totally anonymous, and I think I'm going to take those questions and eventually make a video. I will probably answer them right away as best as I can, and then so that everyone can see them and hear them, I'm going to also make a video of those different questions. And yeah, I hope this video was somewhat important. I hope you guys are taking care of yourself. I hope that you're not, identifying as the hurt girl or the hurt boy, and know that that doesn't have to be your identifier. You don't have to be the alcoholic's daughter. You don't have to be the alcoholic's son, or the sister of an alcoholic, or the brother of an alcoholic, or you don't have to be those things. You can still love them. You can still cheer them on, but I hope you don't take on that responsibility. And I hope that you find some sort of support, whether that's through Al-Anon, which is the family side of Alcoholics Anonymous, or you go to therapy, or you go to your family counseling when your loved one is going through recovery, and that you educate yourself, read Alcoholics Anonymous, do your research, and know that while it is a disease, there are things you can do to help yourself and to protect your own heart, and to understand that person a lot more. So if you're angry with them, it might help you understand where they're coming from. If you're sad, it might give you hope. I just hope that this video did either one of those things as well. So if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments or in the anonymous ask box that I'm gonna leave there. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, hope you learned something, and I will see you in my next video. The next floor sit will be at the end of March, and I will see you in my next video. In the meantime, my name is Parker, this is Stories in the Dust, and I really hope you'll stick around a while. Bye guys! And after a very serious video, here's an adorable sleeping puppy. Enjoy yourselves.